December 1904. Chapter 1. Wesley. I was 14 the first time I came upon Luci Quick on a stark, late December afternoon that smelled of wood smoke and pine needles. Atlas, my dog, was also 14. However, in the unfairness of things, he was already an old man. Our warm breath made clouds as we ran across a thin carpet of frozen leaves. The light was lonely this time of year, dull and gray, full of shadows. Icy snow fell from a low sky. White frost covered leaves and grass. Only last week the sky had been blue and the last leaves of autumn had clung to the branches as one would an old friend about to depart for a long trip. Overnight, a cold front had arrived, freezing everything. But isn't that the way of the world? In an instant, everything changes. We'd come farther into the woods than usual. Atlas led the way, as if he had a reason for taking us off our typical path. Who was I to disagree? Atlas asked for nothing, never complained. He loved me unconditionally. All my life it had been me and him, Wesley and Atlas, boy and his dog. Whatever path he chose, I would follow. Lately, he'd slowed, his once youthful yellow Labrador body now stiff. He could still jump onto my bed, but it pained him, so I lifted him instead. Atlas wasn't one to complain. Still, despite all that, when he entered the outdoors, he came back to life, seeming to forget his arthritis and creaky bones. He was as game as ever for our roamings through the wood, our escape from my family's estate, where we could breathe. If rage and secrets had a smell, it would be my parents' home. That morning, a crash had woken me in the early dawn, followed by the raised voices of my parents. I'd pulled the covers over my head and scrunched my eyes closed, willing it to stop. Atlas had whined and pressed his bulky warmth against my legs. We couldn't make out the words, only waves of anger. Even so, this felt different. Usually, they didn't argue out loud. No, their disdain was the quiet kind, like the frozen dirt under these leaves. After breakfast, Atlas and I made a run for it. We knew danger, could smell it. Stay away, the instinct whispered. Whatever had angered them would be taken out on me one way or another. Father's strap across my back, or mother's cold banishment to my room. She was like the frozen ground, unmoving, impenetrable. Father was more like the unexpected cold front, a violent temper that came from nowhere and without warning. We came out of a thicket of trees into a clearing. Nestled between firs, pines, and maples stood a shack. Atlas went perfectly still, then sat back on his haunches. A girl held a crying baby close to her chest as she paced over the frozen dirt. In truth, she was more waif than a girl, as thin as the winter light. She wore a tattered coat the same gray as the boards of the sad dwelling. As motionless as a deer, I watched her. Beside me, Atlas did the same. I took in the shack. The roof sagged. One dirty window had a crack in the shape of a claw. A thin trail of smoke drifted weakly out of a tin stove pipe. In contrast, as if to make up for the sag of the roof, the girl's back was straight as a board. Pink cheeks glowed from the cold. Snow settled on top of her head and shoulders. The baby continued to cry, not loudly, more like a kitten's mew. She couldn't have been more than a few days old, as she was no bigger than a loaf of bread. I didn't think the girl old enough to be the baby's mother. She seemed about the same size as my sister, Lillian. I guessed her to be about 12, the time between a girl and a woman. A mound of freshly turned soil caught my eye. A crude cross made of tree limbs marked it as a grave. Someone had been recently buried. The mother of this girl and the baby.